Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cinema Heroes. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jay Stu.
And today we're talking about Reign of the Supermen. Released in 2019, directed by Sam Liu, written by Tim Sheridan, and starring Jerry O'Connell, Rebecca Romijn, Rainn Wilson, Patrick Fabian, Charles Halford, Cameron Monaghan, Cress Williams, Rosario Dawson, Jason O'Mara is in it, and Tony Todd as Darkseid. Tony Todd, that was cool. So this is part 2 after the death of Superman. They even put these two movies together into a full 2-hour and 46-minute movie called The Death and Return of Superman, which I've still not watched. I am curious, after watching these two movies separately, how they work together. I might have to sit down and spend 3 hours watching it. Stu, you, for a long time, were talking about how you were not looking forward to rewatching this movie. I remember liking this film when I saw it the first time. Rewatching it yesterday, I can agree that it is not as strong as The Death of Superman, but I still kind of liked it, although I do have one huge issue with it, which we'll get into. But overall, I thought it was decent. How did your opinion change, or you still dislike this movie the way you kind of were hinting at earlier?
My opinion has not changed much.
Okay.
I still don't really care for this movie. Out of all of the DC New 52 movies, this is still the one that I like the least.
Okay.
Like I said, it wasn't as excruciating as my last watch.
Mm-hmm.
But it got to a certain point where I was like, okay, I'm ready to get this over with. I even watched it like earlier in the evening so I could get it over with and watch something that I wanted to actually enjoy before I went to bed.
A little bit of a palate cleanser afterwards.
Yeah, a palate cleanser. I didn't want to go to bed on Reign of the Supermen.
That's funny. I unfortunately didn't get to watch it in one sitting. The past couple of days have been busier than I expected, and so I watched most of it yesterday and had to kind of finish it this morning right before we started recording. Mm-hmm. So that might also kind of be part of the reason why I'm okay with it, is just because I didn't watch it all in one go. I took a little break, but yeah, I also, do you have any sort of nostalgia for these 4 Superman characters?
Yeah, specifically Superboy and Steel.
Yeah.
Superboy from the comics. That was my introduction to Superboy.
Right.
Specifically the Amalgam comics, when Marvel and DC teamed up and made they like had this big grand story of the universes kind of merging, which was awesome. And Superboy and Spider-Man like turned into like Super Spider.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was awesome.
That's interesting.
But yeah, that was my introduction to Superboy when Superboy and Spider-Man were fighting. I was like, he is really cool. I don't quite like Superboy in this movie.
Yeah.
I think that's on purpose, but there are like character design things that I don't like. I don't like how young he is.
Mm-hmm.
In the comics, I never considered him like a kid. I assume like biologically he's maybe like 13 or 14. I've always seen him as like 17 or 18.
Yeah.
Which is only 3 or 4 years difference, but
it's a big difference.
When you're a teenager, you go through a lot of changes between the time you're 12 and 18.
Right.
So
right.
that's a big difference. Biologically.
Yeah, I agree. So I do have some nostalgia. I have the comic here of The Return of Superman. I didn't read this when it came out, but I do know, like, the death of Superman was such a big event. I remember it. And I actually do have a couple of comics kind of leading up to the death of Superman, like when I have a Justice League comic where they're fighting Doomsday and stuff. So I don't think I went out and bought any comics during this run when the 4 Supermen were introduced, but I remember seeing them. They were kind of in, I guess, pop culture or something. Like, the internet wasn't a thing then, but I I don't know. I just remember seeing it and like maybe I was looking at like Wizard magazine or something that a friend bought or something. I don't know. Yeah. Cyborg Superman I thought looked so cool when I was a kid. The Eradicator, Last Son of Krypton, they called him then, I thought was awesome. Steel looked really cool. And then I'm trying to think of when this probably came out, like 91, 92, something like that, I think, 93. So as like a 9-year-old kid, I thought Superboy was just the coolest. But I agree. I always kind of thought he was like 16, 17. They talk about, it's been a really long time since I've read this comic, and I flipped through it a little bit this morning. And, there's a part where he's trying to convince Lois that he is Superman. And she's like, Superman was old enough to shave, is what she says to him. So he is supposed to be young, but he's not. But my issue with the design of him in this movie is they made him super, like, he's just small. And I understand they needed to make him look smaller than the other ones, but he's like really skinny.
Really, yeah.
And,
he's very
like
tiny.
you said, they made him almost seem younger than I think they maybe intended. Because they cast Cameron Monaghan, so he's got kind of a lower teenager voice, but he really does seem like he's more like Damian Wayne's age almost, than he is 16 or 17. So I do agree with that. So I think maybe part of the reason why I like this movie maybe a little bit more than you is because I was thinking maybe that nostalgia. I like these characters, and that was one of my big issues with Superman Doomsday is that we didn't get to see those characters. We only saw like a facsimile of Superman in that version, and that was kind of a disappointment for me. And so when I knew that they were making this movie and it was called Reign of the Supermen and it had, them on the cover, I was like, oh, I can't wait. And it had been so long since I read the comic, watching the movie, I was pleasantly pleased. They obviously changed some stuff. And like you said, the design, I actually think Steel looks really cool. The Eradicator, I think, looks pretty cool. Cyborg Superman is the only one that I actually don't totally love the look of. But I think, they updated it decently. I think if they had done a direct copy of how he looked in the comics, number one, it wouldn't match the New 52 aesthetic, and number two, it would probably look a little silly. So
yeah, I agree. The design of Eradicator and Steel look very cool, especially Eradicator.
Yeah.
But Steel I had some nostalgia for because of the animated series.
Right.
And I that Steel is one of the things that I do like about this movie. I like the inclusion of his character. If I were to adapt the death of Superman and and the return of Superman into live action, Steel would absolutely be included. For sure.
And I think now, like, for the longest time, I always kind of thought it would be too hard and it would look kind of silly, or you'd have to do it like the Shaquille O'Neal movie, where like he doesn't have the full face cover and stuff like that. But now with the way they've done Iron Man and stuff in the Marvel movies, I think you could definitely make Steel look amazing in a movie now. And I think it would work really well.
Yeah. I
don't know if we'll ever see a live action adaptation of this story with the 4 Supermen and the death of Superman. It would be awesome if we did, but I don't know. It's it would be interesting for sure. Yeah. Maybe that's something James Gunn has in mind, but I don't know. So, starting at the beginning, my first note is this movie says it's 6 months later, and I immediately thought the end of Death of Superman should not have been the end of Death of Superman because that movie, it feels like they bury Superman, the next day they see a Superman in the sky. It should not have included that. It shouldn't have had the post-credit scenes that we talked about. That should have been this movie. But I also don't like the way this movie started. I don't like how it starts with like a news story and it's talking about the 4 Supermen. I think we should have started on a more personal human note with Lois or the Kents or both grieving, which we get, but we get it after the news story. It just didn't work for me as an opening for the movie personally.
I agree. I like both of those scenes on their own, but I agree they should have been switched. Right. We should have started the movie at the Kent farm. Right. And then the next scene should have been the news. Like they should have been watching that on the news, and then it would go into that news report. Right.
That's what so my other big issue with this movie is there's absolutely no mystery. I mean, okay, there's a tiny bit of mystery surrounding Cyborg Superman, but there's absolutely no mystery surrounding the other Supermen.
Yep. I made that note too.
Yeah. So they should have. We talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League on this podcast a lot, and I don't mean to bring it up again, but they deal with similar story plots. So the way that scene in Zack Snyder's Justice League where Lois brings the coffee to the cops when they resurrect Superman, and then she's like walking away and then looks up and sees this figure in the sky and that look that Amy Adams has. I wanted that in this movie. I wanted to start the movie off with grieving Kent's or grieving Lois, and then maybe they do see it on TV, but like the shock, the like, is he back? That whole thing. Yeah. I wanted that to be a thing.
And then the credits start rolling.
Right.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, that would have been perfect. But instead, they start with the news story. We see them grieving. I like the scene kind of with Perry White talking about like, okay, this is the return of these Supermen. Who are they? Are they invited to the Justice League Watchtower? And then where's Lois Lane? That whole thing. Although I feel like they made Perry White kind of dumb in that scene, but that's a little bit of a nitpick, I suppose. But then Lois is assigned to a story trying to kind of write about these Supermen. And like I said, there's no mystery. She just knows that they're not him. And there's no explanation as to why she knows that, other than the fact that, she saw him die. But like, you'd think there would be some sort of glimmer of hope, or just she wants to talk to these guys to try to figure out who they are, if it's him. But instead, she doesn't really, there's none of that. She's just writing the story and talking to like Wonder Woman.
So with that, I agree to an extent. I think it lacks nuance, and that's tough to talk about with these animated movies because they're so short.
Right.
And like I said, they don't spoon feed you, which I love about these animated movies. They get right into it because they are made for nerds. They're not made for casual, general movie watchers.
Right.
But in this instance, I really think this movie could have benefited from more nuance. I don't mind the idea that Lois immediately knows that these guys are not Superman. But I thought it could have been a bit more subtle. Maybe, like you said, she hopes that one of these guys is Superman, but in the back of her head, she's not stupid. And it's not even a thing of intelligence. Lois just has that in her. Like she has that investigative, or it's not investigative, but what's the word I'm looking for? I guess doubtful.
Skeptical.
For lack of a better word.
Skepticism.
Skeptical. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. She is intrinsically skeptical, which is, I like that about Lois, and I think that, they definitely could have handled that plot point a little more subtly, instead of, well, nope, she just completely rejects the idea that any of these guys are Superman. And like I said, I get it. They're trying to, get the movie going because there's a lot going on in this movie.
Right.
That's one of my problems with the movie. It's just so much going on. You got these 4 Supermen, and they all have to get their due.
Right.
The Eradicator kind of gets pushed to the wayside a little bit because it's so, kind of convoluted. And that brings me to my next point. I don't think that this part of the story can be adapted to live action in movie form, maybe in TV, but it's hard to have essentially 5 Supermen in one movie,
right?
In one 2-hour movie, and it not feel like too much is going on,
right?
Because you have to explain where all of these people came, where all of them came from, why are they here? You got to investigate all of them. It's just, it's too much, right, in my opinion.
That's why this comic is really thick, So
yeah.
They tell the story. They have a lot comic issues. They could stretch that story out and take the time they needed. And I knew that, I wrote that down, that note, but I also understand this is only an 80-minute movie. We kind of got to get the story going. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like kind of what you said, they could have added a little bit more nuance. She's an investigative journalist. Yes, I believe she would have been skeptical, but I also believe there would have been a part of her that really would need to know, who are these guys? Where did they come from? Why are they here now? Kind of thing, And she's writing that story, but she just doesn't seem all that interested. It seems like she's writing the story because she was told to write the story, and she just doesn't want to because she knows these guys aren't Superman. I don't know, it's just something. At least that's how I kind of took it in the beginning of the film.
She shouldn't have been assigned to write the story,
right?
I mean, Perry should. I mean, he knew that she had an emotional connection to Superman,
right?
And he should have been like, "Yo, take it easy. Take a week or two off." I mean, they say it's 6 months afterwards, but that's another issue in itself. Like you said, we don't really feel that. There's nothing indicating that much time has passed. But Perry should have been like, take some time off, go deal with that.
And even if I do think obviously Lois is close to Superman, but also in this universe, she was dating Clark Kent, who is still missing. So, I think she would be kind of, I don't know. She would have been on a leave of absence or something, maybe. I don't know. 6 months later, maybe not, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think 6 months. I get why they did it, because that's plenty of time to have all these Supermen show up and kind of do their thing and have people talk about them, but it doesn't feel that way.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just,
especially, like I said, since the last movie ended with us immediately seeing a Superman in the sky.
Right. This movie just starts off on a shaky foundation.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Yes.
If I were to adapt this into live action, I would combine Cyborg Superman and Eradicator into one character. He would basically be Cyborg Superman, but he would look like Eradicator. And then as the movie goes forward, like maybe in like the third act, he would look like Cyborg Superman. Like we'd see like the
kind of Terminator.
Terminator. Like like Terminator.
The skin kind of gets peeled off or whatever.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing. Yeah,
absolutely.
That'd be cool.
And he would, he'd have like maybe Hank Henshaw's consciousness put into this robotic body.
Right.
And I would save Superboy for another movie. I would completely eliminate him from this story.
So you would just have Cyborg Superman and Steel.
Steel. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things I liked about from the comics, which they changed a little bit for this movie, was everybody except Steel claims to be Superman. And I did look in the comic. I couldn't remember exactly because, like I said, it's been so long since I read it. But Superboy does tell Lois that he is a clone of Superman. And apparently that's a secret that he's really bad about keeping, because like 2 pages later, he tells another reporter and he ends up on TV explaining that he's a clone of Superman, which makes Lex mad.
Yeah.
But Eradicator and Cyborg Superman both claim to be the Superman. Whereas in this movie, Eradicator does not claim that. He is, if I remember correctly, he's basically just like kind of working on behalf of Superman. The only one that claims to be Superman is Cyborg Superman. And Steel never claimed to be Superman. He was always like, I'm doing this kind of in honor of Superman, but I am not Superman. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting little bit of a change, because it made that, again, it was more of the mystery. Is one of these guys the real Superman? That type of thing. I don't know if in the comic it becomes very apparent that none of them are. I don't remember. But in this movie, only Cyborg Superman claims to be the real Superman, and even comes and talks to Lois and tries to convince her that he's the real Superman. I like the idea of kind of combining the two. Eradicator is one of those. Eradicator and Hank Henshaw both. Okay, so here's a question for you. They changed kind of the origin of Cyborg Superman for this movie. And they made him a servant of Darkseid. Darkseid is not in the comics for The Return of Superman. Cyborg Superman has kind of a weird, convoluted origin. He's an astronaut, but so when he got hit with like radiation and like infused himself with the electronics of the ship or something like that, he ends up on Warworld and working with Mongol, but not for Mongol. Mongol actually kind of works for him. And so I actually just saw a post on Reddit yesterday about somebody asked, which do you like better, Superman Doomsday or the death of Superman / Reign of the Supermen? And overwhelmingly, everybody said Death of Superman was better than Superman Doomsday, but Reign of the Supermen was disappointing. And a lot of the comments said they did not like the inclusion of Darkseid, and they didn't like how they made Doomsday a Darkseid product, or whatever you want to call it. You know, Darkseid was behind Doomsday, which is also not in the comics. With the power of hindsight and knowing that we're building to Apocalypse War, I actually like the inclusion of Darkseid in this movie. And I think it works that Darkseid was the one that turned Hank Henshaw into Cyborg Superman. I kind of like that aspect of it. How do you feel about that?
I hate
it. Okay, fair enough.
I'm okay with the idea that Darkseid is behind Doomsday.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. I actually like that. But Darkseid turning Hank Henshaw into Cyborg Superman, I absolutely hate it. It is the single most frustrating thing about this movie is the inclusion of Darkseid and his big grand evil plan, which I think is so stupid.
Why do you feel that way?
It doesn't make sense. After what we've seen in Justice League War, it doesn't make sense that he would go about purposely turning everyone super in order to take over. That isn't Darkseid to me. Darkseid is about... Darkseid's very smart. He's very intelligent, but he's also very destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Darkseid, it seems, I don't know. It doesn't seem like his plan. It seems like someone else's plan. I just don't see Darkseid doing that.
I will say this. I agree with you about the turning everyday people into superheroes, or they're not even really superheroes, but just super beings.
Yeah. I
don't like that either. I thought that was dumb, and you're right. It feels like a flawed plan. Doesn't feel like a Darkseid plan. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of him turning Hank Henshaw to Cyborg Superman, sending him to Earth and trying to kind of con people into believing that he's Superman and having people trust him to do whatever to get Darkseid to Earth or something. That kind of works for me, but you're right. My biggest issue with the movie, my absolute biggest issue with the movie, is how the movie gets rid of the Justice League. It is the single most dumbest moment in the entire movie. There's this portal that is opened by the Watchtower. They're like, it's kind of this unveiling of the Watchtower. The president is there. The League has kind of escorted the president, which, by the way, one of the notes I wrote was Green Lantern points like an energy bazooka at Superboy, who was flying right by the president's limo. And I was like, surely the security detail would see Green Lantern pointing a bazooka towards the president's car and be like, raise some alarms there. But but nothing. Anyway, there's like an attack, and this portal that is opened kind of breaks and starts to fall, and the League gathers right where it's falling and looks up and just lets it fall on them. Even Flash, who has super speed, who's super sped into the spot, doesn't move out of the way or doesn't move them out of the way. They just literally look up and watch it fall on them.
Yep.
And that, I thought, was that to me felt like they didn't know how to get rid of the League. And that was just what they came up with. And it was just mind-bogglingly dumb.
Yeah.
I understand they wanted to get the League out of there. They wanted to make it like, we have no protectors anymore. This Cyborg Superman is now taking over the city with these apocalypse people. What are we going to do? But I really think they could have kept the League in there. They didn't need they could have just made it parademons, and Cyborg Superman is kind of, ruling the parademons on behalf of Darkseid. And the League is just overwhelmed, or they get, I don't know, but the way they did it just was so dumb.
I think they decided not to do parademons because they had already done that in Justice League War.
Well, they show up briefly in this movie. That's when that first portal opens, the one that falls on the League. They're fighting parademons in that scene.
But they didn't want to. They're not the main threat, though. The main threat are the superhumans.
Right, which just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, it's stupid. Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, I just hated the way they got rid of the League. It just felt, I hate to say lazy, but it just felt a little lazy.
It was definitely lazy.
Yeah.
So I guess now we can talk about the actual return of Superman.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, let's start with the look. I know you love the way he looks. There's not a doubt in my mind.
You would be absolutely correct. I have a soft spot, and I don't know if it's just because it was, again, these comics came out when I was like 9 years oldish, and so then for a long time throughout my kind of preteen years, Superman had the long hair in the comics, but I have a soft spot for long hair mullet Superman. It's not something I need to see in live action because I don't think it would translate well, but I like how he looks in this movie. I think he looks awesome.
I can't get with it, man.
I know, I understand.
Oh man, it I don't know. It looks silly to me. I like the black suit. I love the idea that he has a 5 o'clock shadow.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been fine with a full beard.
Yeah.
But the long hair does not do it for me. Yeah, and I love how he.
At least it's gone by the end of the movie. They didn't keep it.
Yeah. I love how when he uses his Kryptonian suit, his Kryptonian ship.
Yeah.
And crashes, and the way he comes out it, like stands up out of the ship. Oh man, it's so majestic.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that they use the ship like that. I don't remember. I know in the comics he's in like this revitalization kind of chamber thing. It's not his ship. Mm-hmm. And I honestly I cannot remember at all how he gets from the fortress to Metropolis, if he flies a ship or if he can. I don't remember if he can fly at that point, because I know they do kind of keep that the same in the movie. He is not fully powered yet. He does have a big gun in the comic when he kind of shows up on scene.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that they did that, and I like the idea of the ship. That makes a lot of sense to me. That like the ship is the revitalization chamber, and it helps him get to Metropolis. And I do love how he flies it in, and I think he hits Cyborg Superman with it, right? So it was that was all pretty cool. I like that a lot. Another change they made, and I read this online. I don't actually, again, can't really quite confirm it with the comics, but in the movie, Steel asks, why was Eradicator drawing power from you if he's trying to protect you? And the robot, like Helix or whatever, says, quite the opposite. He was actually transferring power from himself to Kal-El. In the comics, I guess it is the other way around. He is actually drawing power from Superman, which is why Superman is not fully powered when he returns. Mm-hmm. Because he was like, Eradicator was taking like the solar radiation or something from Superman, because it's kind of convoluted, and that's why I think they changed it for this movie and why it kind of works okay. Because Eradicator, because he's not technically Kryptonian, does not get power from the sun, and so he had to kind of draw that power from Superman. It's a little weird. He's also not a hologram in the comics, but all of that kind of worked for me in this movie. I thought it was fine. Mm-hmm. And then putting him in the crystal at the end, and that's how they kind of eradicate Cyborg Superman. He shoves the crystal into his brain, and Eradicator, through his memories, I guess, eradicates Hang Ten Shot.
Yeah, that was a weird scene. And I was like, what is going on right now?
Yeah. I made watching this really makes me want to reread the comics, so I might pick up this gigantic graphic novel and reread it and see how they defeat Cyborg Superman and stuff. I don't remember. My biggest memories from the comics are just the characters themselves, and Mongol shows up at one point and destroys Coast City, which is where Hal Jordan is from. Mm-hmm. And this was also the 90s Hal Jordan that had like the gray on his temples, which I remember for whatever weird reason. So, but obviously none of that is in this movie. Mongol's not in this movie. It's all Dark Side.
I do like the music.
Yes, I do too.
They when Superman returns, they reuse his theme from the last movie, and I very much like it.
I do too. I really wish they would release the soundtrack. I don't understand why they didn't. I would have to. I don't know if Frederick Weidman is on Twitter or something, but maybe I'll have to tweet at him and see why. Where's this soundtrack?
I don't think it's up to him.
A bunch of other ones.
I don't think it's up to him.
No, it probably isn't up to him, but he might know the reason why. Sometimes I've tweeted at people and asked questions like that, and they've responded, and other times they don't. Like I asked, there's a composer, and granted these people are busy, but there's a composer named Nami Melamod, I think her name is. She does the music. She did a lot of music for Thor: Love and Thunder, but she also does the music for Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. And they released a soundtrack for the first season of that show, but it doesn't look like they're going to release a soundtrack for the second season. And I tweeted at her asking if there was any, if there's anything she could say about it or if it was going to come out, but I got no response, so I don't know. Performance-wise, vocal performance, I do want to say Jerry O'Connell is the voice of Cyborg Superman and regular Superman, obviously. There was a couple of times when Cyborg Superman is supposed to be angry, didn't quite come across as real as I would have liked it to. And that could have been direction. I don't know. Or it could be Jerry O'Connell kind of holding back. I don't know. That was kind of my only real note on the voice acting in the movie. I like Cameron Monaghan as Superboy. I like Cress Williams as Steel a lot. I
love Cress Williams as Steel.
Yeah.
He was perfect.
Yeah, I agree. And then Rainn Wilson as Lex Luthor is good as well. How do you feel about Lex Luthor being the one to open the portal and bring back the League and stuff?
I could take it or leave it. I mean, I don't dislike it. It seems like a Lex Luthor thing to do, and like in the grand scheme of things, like I could see him doing that, but like for himself, to serve himself.
Right, and he does say that. He's like, "Don't add me to your friends list yet. This is purely a business decision."
Yeah,
and I would like a little bit more explanation on that. What was the business decision exactly? I don't really know, but yeah, that line made sense to me. That he's like, I didn't do this for, to be a good guy. I did this for my business or whatever. So, but yeah, Rainn Wilson, Rebecca Romijn's good. The guy that plays Eradicator, I liked. I don't remember who that is. I think actually it's the same voice actor who's Bibbo, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Charles Halford is Bibbo, Babowski, and Eradicator. But yeah, good voice acting. We have Nathan Fillion's back, obviously, and Jason O'Mara and Christopher Gorham. And Martian Manhunter is an actor named Nyambi, which is kind of cool. And I remember thinking at the beginning of this movie going, in the comics, Supergirl poses as Clark Kent. So I was like, how are they doing that in this movie? And then it dawned on me like halfway through the movie. I'm like, oh yeah, it's Martian Manhunter. I was like, it's going to have to be Martian Manhunter. But I like how in this movie, he's posing as Superman, not as Clark Kent. And so it's very obvious because the way he talks is...
He's very stiff.
Yeah, it's very stiff. Love the end of this movie. I really like how we get the classic Clark Kent walks outside, runs towards the camera, rips open his shirt. And then we even get a bit of it's not an exact copy, but kind of a Christopher Reeve flying through space out, towards the camera kind of thing, which I really, really, really liked. And the music is good in that scene too.
Yeah. I mean, they've done that a few times in Superman movies. I mean, obviously it's an homage to Christopher Reeve, because even Man of Steel does it.
And during the flight scene. Yeah. Kind of, which is one of my favorite shots of the movie.
Yes, I agree. And he gets a new suit, which is great.
I actually didn't really pay much attention to that. But you're
really?
Right. It's the
as much as you hate the turtleneck.
I know. I don't know what's over there. But no, I guess I just didn't register it. But you're right. I do. It is a new suit. Is it more of kind of like the Rebirth suit almost?
Yes. Yeah. It's the Rebirth suit. The Rebirth suit is underrated. I really like the Rebirth suit, but he has a thinner belt, no turtleneck.
Right, no turtleneck, which is awesome.
And I think the color of the blue is different.
Could be.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more saturated. I wouldn't say brighter, but I think it's a little bit more saturated.
Nice. Yeah, I have to rewatch that end scene again and really kind of pay attention to that. As soon as you said it, I realized, oh yeah, he doesn't have the collar, but it didn't, like I said, didn't even like register when I was watching it. It's funny. All right, well, Stu, rating. What would you give Reign of the Supermen?
I'm gonna give Reign of the Supermen 2.5 Supermen out of 5.
2.5.
Yeah,
that feels about right for how you feel about the movie. I'm going to go a little higher just because, yes, there was some stuff that I obviously complained about with this film, and I really don't like the way they get rid of the League. But I do still kind of like this movie. So I'm going to give it, I'm tempted to give it 3.5, but I think I'll just go 3. I think I'll give it 3 out of 5 Superman mullets for this one. Well, we'd love to know what you think of Reign of the Superman. You can always let us know at cinemaheroes.com. You can always leave a comment on our Instagram posts. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment down below. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you however you want to reach out. I think that about wraps it up for this episode, though. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jay Stu.
As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing.